energy for some reaction. It's a bit of a mixed bag. We see crude under a little bit of pressure, down a tenth or so. In fact, Pippa Stevens is here. So, Pippa, just curious for your thoughts on that. When we've seen the prospect of an agreement or a termination in the war, we've often seen energy prices sell off somewhat. I'm a little surprised they're not going higher today, but then there are tariffs and all these other things to contend with.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's so much going on, whether you look at Russia, Venezuela, or Iran. So there's a lot to factor in right now. And of course, what the market hates more than bad news is uncertainty. But if we focus on those tariffs specifically that are set to go into effect next week, and so even that reduced 10% tariff on Canadian oil could have really big energy consequences across markets and lead to higher prices for consumers. So the U.S. is the world's largest oil producer, but we still import roughly 6.6 million barrels per day of crude, more than 60% of which comes from Canada. Now, much of that is what's known as sour crude. The U.S. primarily produces light crude oil, and so refiners can't just switch gears. It's not one-to-one. Patrick Tahan from Gas Buddy said this could ultimately lead to as much as a 25-cent increase on prices at the pump. In the short term, should Canada retaliate with export tariffs, prices could go even higher. Now, on the nuclear side, the impact could be even larger. The U.S. imports almost 100% of its uranium, with more than a quarter coming from Canada. As Segre Capital put it, the only credible path to U.S. fuel security is to have stronger ties with our northern neighbor. Now, much of that uranium comes from Cameco, which has tariff clauses in many of its contracts, meaning the off-taker will have to pay that higher price. Now, in regulated utility markets, think Dominion, Duke, Southern Company, and Entergy, fuel is a pass-through cost. So if the utility is paying a higher price, that ultimately winds up on consumers' bills. And so, Kelly, that's why people are saying we still could see an even greater exemption for Canadian energy.